Mom, how many of these old phones do we have in here anyway? It looks like, good grief, Mom, there are 5 old phones in here. Don't you think we could get rid of them? Hi, my name is Bethany Lambert, and many families in my area face the what to do with old cell phones dilemma. Most of us update our cellular phones whenever our contract allows, and families in my area are constantly changing providers. The result? A lot of unused cell phones just lying around. As I started researching this project, I was amazed to learn that only 8% of unused cell phones are recycled. With that fact in mind, I was ready to begin my Environmental Ambassador project. This portfolio chronicles the results of my project, Calling All Recyclers. First, I have my project ID page, table of contents, and planning process, which help me to plan and carry out my project. The first step in the planning process is to identify concerns. I am concerned that people in my area are not informed about electronic waste disposal. With my concern in mind, I set my goal to create a presentation to give to 3 groups about the dangers of e-waste and how e-cycling can help. I put my emphasis on the collection and recycling of old cell phones and set the goal of collecting 200 cell phones to be recycled. Being from a town of fewer than 300 people, I knew this was a very high goal, but I was going to give it my best shot. I would also recruit 4 Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, climate ambassadors. The next step in my project was to research the impact of e-waste on the environment. I knew that electronic waste wasn't good for the environment, but I had no idea just how harmful it could be. I started out by finding a definition for electronic waste. According to the National Institutes of Health at www.nih.gov, updated in August of 2008, e-waste is defined as old, end-of-life electronic appliances, such as computers, laptops, TVs, DVD players, and mobile phones that have been discarded by their original users. According to the Environmental Protection Agency at www.epa.gov, last updated November of 2012, in 2009, e-waste totaled 2.37 million tons, and only 25% of this was recycled. So, if only 25% of electronics are recycled, what happens to the other 75%? Most of it gets thrown into dumpsters to end up in a landfill. And most of these electronics contain elements like lead, nickel, cadmium, and mercury. If these elements get into the water supply, they can seriously negatively affect the intellectual development of infants. To top it all off, e-waste is 100% non-biodegradable, so these toxins will remain in the earth forever. According to www.securingthehuman.org, most people in the United States replace their cell phones every 18 months. With 91% of the U.S. adult population owning a cell phone, just imagine how many cell phones go into landfills every single year. My next step was to identify the relationship of my project to my home, school, and community, and this topic definitely relates. In just my own home, due to switching cell phone providers in the past few years, we have 5 unused cell phones. My school could also use a lot of environmental help. Only 3 of the classrooms in our high school provide a place to recycle paper, and there is nowhere in our school to recycle aluminum, plastic, or cardboard. Besides our school not being on the cutting edge of recycling, our entire community is sort of behind the times, as we have no recycling bins. Because of this lack, most things that could be recycled end up in the trash because the nearest place to recycle is 25 miles away. In addition to the general lack of recycling, my community has a bigger problem, specifically with electronic recycling. Few people around know about recycling electronics. This is harmful in my area because people are always getting new electronics. Over the past few years, there have been several new phone towers put up in our area, and people are always switching providers. To help fight this problem, I first needed to come up with some potential solutions. There are many possible ways I could combat this problem. I could educate others about electronic recycling and assist them in getting their own phones and electronics donated. I could make a presentation and go around to schools to educate my peers about electronic recycling. Another possible solution would be to set up an electronic recycling center in my own community. Not only would it provide a place for electronics to be recycled, but it could provide information to the community members about the e-waste problem. The different projects that could be carried out to help eliminate e-waste are endless. I wanted to do a stewardship project that focused on providing drop-off locations for old cell phones to be recycled. Thus, my stewardship project was born, calling all recyclers. I wanted to reach a large number of people with my project, so I decided to reach out to 3 different communities. I started by putting an ad in my hometown Chambers shopper, asking people to donate their old or broken cell phones. In order to be more environmentally friendly, I made my donation boxes out of spare boxes just lying around our school that would have been thrown away otherwise. I put a donation box in our town grocery store and in the FCS room at our school, so students and teachers could also donate. This shows a student in my school donating her old cell phone. Living in a town of fewer than 300 people, I knew I would have to reach out to other communities in order to meet my goal. My FCS teacher's daughter-in-law is a State Farm agent at Wakefield State Farm Insurance Agency in O'Neill. This was a perfect opportunity to get my project into a larger town. A student from our school that worked in O'Neill also volunteered to take a box to Taco John's. I incorporated other high schools into my stewardship project through my educational presentations, but I'll explain that more in depth later. I put an ad on our local radio station, KBRX, as well as on their website, kbrx.com. I contacted many of my relatives from all over the state and even out of state, and they helped me out by mailing in dozens of cell phones. After collecting these phones, my plan was to take them to the recycling center at Best Buy. This project is something that could be duplicated in many communities to help reduce e-waste all over the state and nation. This stewardship project made me more environmentally aware, and not just of e-waste. I found myself turning off the lights when I left a room, putting on a sweatshirt instead of turning up the heat, and unplugging my phone charger when I was done with it. To make my project better, I could have started earlier in order to give people more time to donate. And I could have tried to reach out to even more communities. This is proof that I completed the mandatory stewardship project summary form found online. With all of this out of the way, I still wasn't done with my stewardship project. This is where my educational presentations come in. In my educational presentations, I extended my stewardship project by taking donation boxes to the schools where I presented to students. I began by creating a PowerPoint about the dangers of electronic waste and how we can combat e-waste by e-cycling. I also included facts and statistics about the benefits of e-cycling, and I asked students to help me by donating their old cell phones. I wanted to target high school groups because nearly every high schooler I know has a cell phone, and most of them don't know that electronic recycling exists. For my first educational presentation, I attended an O'Neill FCCLA chapter meeting, where I gave my presentation to 26 of their chapter members. All of the students seemed very eager to listen, and they had very positive feedback for me. I gave them surveys to see what they learned from my presentation, and 35% of them said that they were learning about e-waste for the very first time. They'd never even heard of it. 81% of them responded that they had at least one phone they could bring to help me out. One person even said she had 10. And most importantly, 92% of them said that they would be more aware of e-waste in the future because of my project. I left a cell phone drop box in the O'Neill High FCS room. I felt that my first educational presentation was very successful, and I was excited for the next two. For my next presentation, I spoke to a junior high FCS class at Wheeler Central High School. I was surprised to hear many of the same responses from the Wheeler Central students. Many of them had also never heard of electronic recycling. 58% of them said that they had phones that they could donate to my project. I thought that if all the students who had phones actually remembered to bring them, I would surpass my goal of collecting 200 cell phones. I knew that this presentation was successful because 100% of the students said that they would be more aware of e-cycling. I was very pleased with this presentation, and I was ready for my final presentation to the teen living class in my own high school. I went in on January 18th to present. The teen living class only had 4 people in it, but I felt like this was a very good class to talk to because all of the students were very active in school and FCCLA, and I knew that they would be willing to help me out. When I went into the room, I found that there were also 3 other students working, so they got in on my presentation too. This was my most successful presentation. 6 of the 7 students said that they would bring cell phones to help me out, and all of the students said that they would be more aware of e-cycling in the future. I feel like overall, my educational presentations were very successful. Based on my surveys, 96% of the students I presented to said that they would be more aware of e-cycling in the future. I could have improved the effectiveness of my project by giving the presentations earlier to give students more time to donate their cell phones. I also could have tried to give 4 or 5 presentations or presented to my whole school to get the word out about e-cycling to more people. However, these presentations did help to make my stewardship project a success. I was excited to surpass my goal of collecting 200 cell phones by collecting over 250. I was also able to collect chargers and extra batteries and donate those as well. I also recruited 4 Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, climate ambassadors. I became a climate ambassador myself by having our school principal, Justin Frederick, take the Energy Star Challenge to improve energy efficiency in our school by at least 10%. I also recruited 3 of the members that I presented to in my own school to find a business in our community to take the challenge. My project was definitely affecting our community in a positive way. Next is my project's connection to family and consumer sciences. My project relates to FCS in more than one way. In my own Teen Living FCS class freshman year, one of our projects was to recycle an old item creatively to make a new one. One of the national FCS standards is to analyze the relationship of the environment to family and consumer resources. My project did just that by recycling resources to help maintain the environment. Another national FCS standard is to analyze conditions that influence human growth and development. One of the factors that I investigated was how the environment can affect development. As I mentioned, if some of the chemicals from cell phones infiltrate the water supply, they can negatively affect the intellectual development of infants. These are some of the other national FCS standards related to my project. Finally, here is my bibliography with all of my resources. Today, I have told you about how electronic waste can harm the environment and how e-cycling can help. I explained how this problem relates to my home, school, and community. I explained my stewardship project, Calling All E-Cyclers, and how I use presentations to educate others about this problem and to help make my project more successful. I also explained how this project connects to my family and consumer sciences courses. This project has really helped make me more environmentally aware. Next time I get a new cell phone, I'll make sure I donate the old one right away. And throughout this project, I know I've solved one other problem for sure. After donating our 5 cell phones, there's a lot more space in our junk drawer at home.